are literally shaping the planet.
Purpose is the only pathway to a regenerative future.
We have a choice to stay with the status quo or to change.
What is the point of trying to be just resilient when we can actually innovate?
So it is a pleasure to be here today. And what I'm going to share with you over the next 30 minutes is really sort of the real story, my lessons learned on how a failed business really led to a bigger opportunity. So I've kind of put it into a David Letterman top 10 as I share my 10 biggest learnings as I've gotten to this point in my career. I'm going to also tell you the story about how my business grew out of business and led to the business that I'm doing now. So, and I will warn you, you have to participate even from your own office or home. So who here wants to be a success? When I started as an entrepreneur, I think my focus was always on being successful. And as I went through a number of different enterprises, as was just lifted, I'm certainly a serial entrepreneur. I think it just means I have unmedicated ADD. But as I went through these experiences, I started to question if that was really the appropriate goal. So if you said to yourself when I asked that question, yes, I want to be a success, what does that mean to you? Because success obviously means something different for lots of people. For many of us, it's a status symbol. It's a position within an organization or a position within your community. You could measure success based on happiness or some sort of wealth accumulation, or perhaps, honors and awards are sort of a symbol of your success. But as an engineer, I looked up the definition in the dictionary of success. And if you look at the definition, it's the favorable or prosperous termination of an attempt or an endeavor. The part I didn't like about that was the word termination, because at the end of the day, success is finite. And what I started to realize is that success, in fact, is the wrong goal. And as an entrepreneur or a business owner, if you're focused on success, you're actually not thinking big enough, and it limits your opportunity. So I changed my perspective to focus on significance, because while success is finite, meaning you won the job, you got the award, you got the deal, you won the race, and I was a track athlete in college, so I was always focused on winning the race. Significance is infinite, because that means you did something that impacted somebody else, it never ends. And when you apply that to your business, it means you're focused on impact. So I went back, I was asked to speak at my high school a couple of years ago, and I went back and pulled out my old yearbook, which I am not sharing with you today because I graduated in 1988 and it was big hair years. But what I realized is that in that yearbook, I was voted most likely to succeed, and it is the dumbest picture I've ever taken in my life, because myself and David Bell, who was also voted most likely to succeed, are dressed in our finery and we're leaning on a Porsche. I can tell you with great certainty that if I selected any picture today to measure what I felt like my accomplishments were in my business or personal life, my car would absolutely not be in it. I would probably select something like when I launched my company Nourish, and we got all of our clients together and did a huge support for the victims of a hurricane, and were able to send 5,000 bottles of water to people in need. That is significance, that is impact. So my first takeaway, I told you there's 10, is that if you want to drive a sustainable business, you have to focus on significance over success. Focus on the impact, focus on the effects and the impact that it has on your clients and on the world and on the people that are using the product, not on success. Number 2, focusing on what you know versus what you notice. The unfortunate reality is that all innovation comes from what you notice, not from what you know. And those of us that have invested in lots of advanced degrees, that's kind of unfortunate because we know a lot of stuff. But your knowledge may help you solve something, but the actual innovation always comes from what you notice. We often look at the same thing as everyone else, but we see something different. That's not what you know, that's what you notice. And in almost every case where I had a business that either failed or grew out of business, it was because I stopped noticing something and I started focusing too much on what I knew. So I'm going to give you an example, and I want you at your desk in your home to do this out loud. You have to say this. Your family will think you're nuts. But on the next slide, I'm going to give you a series of words. In this case, it's yellow and blue. What I want you to do is read out loud the words, and you have to actually say it out loud for it to work. So ready, go. Yellow, green, blue, orange, red, purple, blue, green, pink, orange, red, purple, purple, black, pink. Almost everyone reads those at about the same cadence. But now what I ask you to do is go back and read the colors that you see. Ready, go. Red, blue, orange, yellow, white, green, white, yellow, red, red, white, orange, purple, green, blue. If you're like me, what you find is you cannot read the colors as quickly as you can read the words. And that is because the analytical side of your brain knows that the word is yellow. And it doesn't allow the spatial side of your brain to notice that I wrote it in the color red. Now, if you want to do an interesting test at your own house, if you ask a second grader to do this, they will do it in exactly the same amount of time because their left brain has not outdeveloped their right brain. But what that basically shows you is that for most of us, we are so analytically focused on our business that we often stop noticing things. And the real key to sustainable success or significance in your business is to focus on what you notice, not on what you know. Number 3 is focusing on skill sets versus mindsets. When I started my company, Nourish, we focused on building the dream team of skill sets. We went out and hired executives that had all the perfect match of functions. Somebody on the legal side, somebody on the finance side, somebody with marketing, somebody with product development. And it turned out to be actually quite a disaster because we were not aligned from a mindset perspective. And so I started focusing on how do we build a team that has mindsets over skill sets. Unless you are doing brain surgery, or in my case, my background's aerospace engineering, rocket science, you can teach people to do almost anything you need them to do, but you cannot teach them how to think. You cannot teach them how to approach challenges. And so I now have this poster on my desk. It's the attributes of those people who made the 10th grade history book. And if you look at these attributes, what it shows you is that mindsets matter. Because as you go down the list, the top things look pretty good. But as you get to the bottom, what you find is things like irreverent, disrespectful, masters of the improv. These are the behaviors that someone needs to truly be significant, to truly make change, to disrupt an industry. But these are not the behaviors you would have been given a gold star by your teacher for in kindergarten. So most of us were not taught to exhibit those behaviors as good. If those behaviors are important in your company, you have to find people who are comfortable exhibiting those types of mindsets. And so for me, as Nourish started to get into its challenges, we realized that we needed a team that had shared mindsets, almost more importantly than some of the skill sets. Another example of this, I had a company, before I started Nourish, I had a company called Dunk. And if you can see my little thumbnail, we did custom footwear with Shaquille O'Neal and other NBA stars. So yes, this is actually bigger than my frame. When I first met Shaq, it was interesting because I was dying to see all the trophies. This was the year he had won the MVP of the regular season, the All-Star game, and the finals. And so my husband and I went to his house for lunch, and there were no trophies anywhere. And I asked him, I was like, dude, where are the trophies? And he said, when I was growing up, my father had a rule that if you won an award or a trophy, you were allowed to keep it in your room for 2 weeks. Then you had to put it in the basement. Because if you were so focused on celebrating what you did yesterday, you couldn't possibly be focused on what you were going to do tomorrow. And that was such an amazing takeaway for me because up until then, I had always filled my office, like most people, with my diplomas, the awards I'd gotten before, but those were all about the past. So I challenged myself to completely change my surroundings. And if I were to walk into my office today, what you would see is that everything in it represents my future, represents what I want to accomplish, whether it's the project I'm working on this week, whether it's my goal for the end of the year, whether it's my family's goal for 5 years from now. If it's not in front of you, you will not accomplish it. Number 4, focusing on answers versus questions. Most of us wake up every day looking for answers. And that's all we do, is try to solve problems by looking for answers. But the key to success and significance is almost always in the questions. The challenge is we don't ask questions very well. So when I was a little kid, my favorite thing to do was to play with Legos. And that was before they had pink ones for girls. I loved building things. And Legos came in a box like this. They came in a big bin, and it was just a variety of sizes and colors of rectangles. What I did with them was totally up to me. If anyone has small children and you've ever shopped for Legos today, you will find that they don't look like that anymore. Instead, Legos come in a box, and there are a variety of kits. And this kit in particular has the 1,945 pieces you need to build that castle. And thankfully, it comes with an instructions manual. This is not for the 4-year-old. This is for you, the parent, because you're actually the one who's going to help build it. When I first saw this, I was mortified, because the next generation of folks are not being taught how to envision things. They're being taught how to build that castle. And they are masters at following instructions. The problem is I didn't want the instructions. So I threw my instructions out. I put all the things in a bin. And my son immediately was like, oh my gosh, we're doing it wrong. And I thought, what are you talking about? He said, well, it doesn't look like that. What a shame. Because I don't know about you, but I did not decide that Lego is the world's expert in what a castle's supposed to look like. But I highly encourage you to think about focusing on the questions, not on the answers, because the next generation is being taught to get to answers as quickly as possible. And I think that's actually extremely scary. Number 5, focusing on what you can do versus what you can't not do. Many of us can do a lot of things. For example, aerospace engineer, I am really good at spreadsheets. I don't like them, but I'm really good at them. And it's an inconvenient truth that for many of us, when we were younger and we did things really well, everyone around us who loved us a lot said, oh, you're really good at that. You should do more of it. But the reality is what you're good at, what you can do, may not be what you absolutely love to do and what you can't go through the day not doing. So I always give people an exercise. If you're a to-do list person, I am a huge to-do list person. And I hope that on Friday, my list from Monday is a little bit smaller. The interesting thing, if I do something in a day and it wasn't on my list, I will write it on there just for the sheer pleasure of scratching through it. If you look at your to-do list every Friday for about 4 or 5 weeks, you will always see the same things. Those are the things you don't like to do. You may be good at them, but you don't like them. And whenever you find an hour in your day, you will push them off until Friday and maybe never get to them. They probably roll week after week. Those are the things that you should find someone else in your company to do. Hire a person who loves to do those things, because those are the things that while you're good at, you may not be actually putting the time and attention to that you need. That was true for me with Nourish, with my company. As we were growing, the things that I just didn't really have the personality for, I always pushed off to the end. And those were the things that became critical as the business sort of hit its pivot point. I will also tell you that when I was an engineer at Georgia Tech, I had a professor one time that told me I had an engineering mind and a liberal arts personality. Now, at the time, I thought I needed medication because that sounded schizophrenic. But in retrospect, he saw what I saw, which was those were the things that I did not like to do. My personality didn't match it. Number 6, and I think this is honestly one of the most important for a successful business and a significant business, focusing on the what versus the so what. Most of us as entrepreneurs, we develop a what. It's a good, it's a service, it's what we do. And over time, our ego is in the what. We are passionate about what we do. And people used to say all the time, you have to be passionate about what you do. I totally disagree. You do not need to be passionate about what you do. You have to be passionate about the so what that you do. And the reason for that is the so what is the impact. So if you focus on the what and people give you suggestions for how you can improve your business, you won't listen. You will immediately defend. But if you focus on the so what, if your passion is in the impact, then people can give you suggestions and you will improve every single day. So make sure that your focus is not on what you do. Don't be passionate about what you do. Be passionate about the so what you do and the impact. And I see this in almost everybody. When someone comes to NOWaccount and brings their resume, the first thing I look at is it a list of what's or a list of so what's? Most people's resumes are a list of what's. I was president of this. I was chief marketing officer here. I was the head of operations here. Congratulations, your butt kept a chair warm for that period of time. But what impact did you have? What change did you cause? What improvement did you drive? I have completely shifted the way that I look at hiring team members around their so what's, around their impact. Because if you did one thing and you had awesome impact, that is much more valuable to me than if you did 10 things and you just kept a chair warm for that period of time. So make sure as you think about building your team that you focus on the so what's that your people are doing as opposed to just what they do. Number 7, and this goes back to the title of my presentation, focusing on what you excel at versus what you fail at. Most of us spend the better part of our day trying to avoid failure, right? We try to avoid mistakes. And yet, in a way, we should be seeking out that failure, because if you can fail fast and fail forward, it is much more valuable to the organization. If you try to avoid it, it will still happen. You almost never completely avoid it. But when it does happen, it will be epic and it will be painful. So when I was first starting Nourish, Sarah Blakely, who obviously most people know, and I were having lunch, and we were talking about what I was doing with Nourish. We were patenting this spill-proof bottled water for children. We were going through the design, and her dad was having lunch with us, and he shared with me a story, which was when Sarah was growing up, every Friday night at the dinner table, he would ask her and her brother what they failed at that week. If they did not have an answer, they got punished. Now, I thought that was funny, that he actually punished his child for not failing that week. And he said, absolutely. If you went through a whole week without failing, shame on you. You didn't push the envelope. You didn't challenge any of your assumptions. You didn't try anything new. And so I've really tried to encourage that both with my family, but also with my company. Encourage small failures. Fail fast. Identify it. What are we going to do to fix it? And always fail forward. So Nourish is a business that I started back. My son was born in 2005. And I became very alert to the fact that kids were constantly spilling things. And so not finding a solution and having him carry around juice boxes and all these sugary drinks, I decided to design and patent a spill-proof bottled water for children. Nourish was growing exponentially. Everyone loved the product. We were selling in children's gift stores. We were selling in newsstands at the airport, parody shops. If you went into any large airport, Nourish was there for your child to have a water that you could either mix a bottle out of if it was a baby, or a spill-proof bottled water if it was a toddler. And I had visions of being on the cover of Fortune. We were growing, like I said, very rapidly. We had bootstrapped the company. Friends and family had put together a little bit of money. We had patented our products. We had developed it, and we were selling. About a year into the business, we got our first big order from Whole Foods, and my business partners and I started to high-five each other. Now we were shipping truckloads instead of cases and pallets, and everything worked great until we realized that when we were selling to these large customers, it was taking longer and longer to get paid. I still remember the day that I dropped my son at daycare and I sat in my car, put my head on the steering wheel, and I cried because our business was growing to death. Our customers were taking 3 and 4 months to pay us. Even though they loved the product, there was no way I could take on larger and larger orders. I was having to pass on orders, and nobody starts a business to turn down orders. And I was talking to one of my suppliers one day, just lamenting the fact that I was going to grow to death. And I do believe more businesses grow out of business than go out of business. And he said, Lara, you just have a working capital issue. Everybody has that. Now, you don't tell an aerospace engineer that everyone has a problem, because that's for sure what I had to focus on. And so I started looking at everything that was out there. Now, mind you, I don't even like finance. I was an operations, marketing, engineer type person. My finance professor at Harvard would fall out of his chair if he knew that I was in finance right now. But I had a problem and I couldn't solve it. And my problem was that my customers were taking a long time to pay. I went down to the banks to look at getting a loan. There were asset-based loans. There were loans with personal guarantees. There were small business loans. But at the end of the day, I didn't want the debt on my balance sheet because I knew I was going to need that debt capacity for other things. I looked at factoring. I looked at receivables finance. I looked at everything that was out there, and all of it put a liability on my balance sheet. In a way, it exacerbated the problem because at the end of the day, I was the free loan to all of my customers. I was the free bank. So why would lending me money solve anything? It would just make the problem bigger. I mean, I would have cash, I would feel better, but I still would be waiting to get paid. And so I was sitting at lunch one day and my aha was, this restaurant never waits to get paid. Because if you think about it, people who sell to consumers, 98% of that credit that's extended to the consumer is done through the credit card system. So when you swipe your card at Starbucks, Starbucks gets paid immediately. They didn't borrow money. They didn't factor. They get their actual revenue immediately. And for that service, they pay a merchant fee. When and if you pay your Visa bill, not their problem. But on the B2B side, credit cards are used less than 2% of the time. So most businesses would gladly take a card for payment if it meant they could get their actual revenue immediately and invest in their own business. But their customers don't want to pay with a credit card because, quite frankly, if they pay you with a card, they now owe the bank. And if they don't pay that on its due date, they will be assessed interest and penalties. But if they don't pay your net 30 invoice on the 30th day, nothing happens. So congratulations. If you send an invoice, you've made a loan, you're a free bank. And if you're like me, you suck at it. And so my big aha was, we're going to create a payment system that allows any business that sells to other businesses or governments the ability to just get paid immediately in a way that feels like taking a credit card. No factoring, no loan, no debt on your balance sheet. NOWaccount would never have happened if Nourish hadn't been failing. We were growing to death. We had this problem. So while I didn't come from the finance industry, I'd never worked for a bank, I'd never been on the lending side, most innovation comes from the demand side of a problem. And I was on the demand side of the problem. So as you're building your business, look for those opportunities. Your biggest pain point, your failure, could be the biggest opportunity you have. And what I realized is everyone kept telling me cash is king, that just go get a loan, go try factoring, cash is king. What I realized is, well, actually flow is queen. And if you've ever played chess, you can't win without the queen. So just going out and borrowing cash doesn't solve anything. What I needed was for my cash to flow. I needed like liquid Drano for my cash flow. And that's what NOWaccount became. So number 8 would be think big, but act small. Most of us, when we see an opportunity, we think about the big strategic opportunity. NOWaccount is massive. Last year, there were $33 trillion with a T of trade credit in the United States. A third of that is originated by small business. So I could get enamored with how we're going to take $11 trillion a year off the balance sheets of small businesses and we're going to put it in the capital markets. But at the same time, I have to act very small because every day, one of my clients, a small business, is really looking to make payroll. They're looking to take that big account from Coca-Cola or the federal government. And so really building out a team that focuses on, yes, we're going to go after this big opportunity, but we're going to do it one happy client at a time. And how you balance those is really the key. With Nourish, I didn't do that. With Nourish, I had these big orders. I was excited about filling them, but I didn't realize the day-to-day, this is going to take 3 months to get paid. This is going to take 45 days to get paid. Number 9 is solve your own problems. All the time when I talk to my clients, they talk about how, oh, this is a challenge I have. And I always say, what would you do to solve it? Because that's a business opportunity either for you or for somebody else. And if you can think about what those solutions are, that becomes your next opportunity. I still remember sitting in my car and crying when Nourish was going to die. But what I didn't realize is that Nourish dying was the key to me even thinking about NOWaccount. And without Nourish, I never would have started NOWaccount and been helping, thousands of small businesses. I would have just been helping myself, which I was kind of happy to do at the time, to be honest. So again, my hardest part was I was growing to death, but it led to my bigger opportunity. So I'm going to close with just a couple of things that I want you to take away. Number one, your greatest strength, and I mean this for you as a person, but also you as a company. Your greatest strength is also your greatest weakness. It can be an opportunity or it can be the challenge that takes you down. So think about that. Focus on what your strength is, but think about how it's your weakness and how do you add things that balance that out. Your best ideas happen when you lack resources. So I never would have thought of NOWaccount if I hadn't been in trouble with Nourish. I never would have thought of Nourish if I hadn't been in trouble as a mom toting my child around. Your best ideas happen when you lack resources. So COVID is a time when we all lack a lot of resources. It is a gift. The greatest innovations are going to come out of this time if you're looking for them. If you're sitting around just lamenting the problems, then you'll never find them. The power of the mirror is exponentially more powerful the closer it is to you. When I was in business school at Harvard, I had the opportunity to work with a woman named Laura Liswood, who wrote the book called Women World Leaders. And I hosted the 18 women heads of state for 3 days. What was amazing was a woman named Vigdis Finnbogadr, who was the president of Iceland for almost 20 years, longest sitting female head of state. And she made the comment that in her country, little boys would ask, can a boy be president? I thought that was funny because all you have to do is turn on the television and see the leader of the free world is a male. And she said, but the president of the United States isn't real to a little boy in Iceland. So while you're out there building your big opportunity, remember that the people you're having the most impact on are sitting next to you. It's your coworker. It's the person that works for you. It's the person you work for. And it's your clients and your investors. And finally, what you're good at may not be what you love. And that's okay. That's why you build great teams. It took me a while to realize that I didn't love some of the things I was great at. But when I finally did, and I brought in people to do that, NOWaccount started to really take off. So hopefully you learned that sooner than I did. At the end of the day, I think the key is to be real. Most of us are told that we can fake it till we make it. When I first started building Nourish, people would tell me my presentations didn't look enough like Coca-Cola. Now, seriously, you think I can pretend to be Coca-Cola? People are going to see through that pretty darn quickly. So as soon as I went back to admitting what I didn't do, admitting what I didn't have yet, just being real and authentic, the business started to take off. Of course, that led to my next problem. But at the end of the day, the culture of any organization is shaped by the worst behavior the leader is willing to tolerate. 90% of the time, that bad behavior is exhibited by the leader themselves. So if you're willing to tolerate your own bad behavior, if you're willing to tolerate bad behavior from some of your teammates, then that sets the tone for the whole company. So that is those are my 10 lessons learned from the failure of Nourish that led to NOWaccount.